drink. Think of like a Tom Collins, falls under that kind of highball category. And then it's also a glass, like a highball glass, a Collins glass. In the 1890s, it was slang term. Ball means glass, and highball was tall glass. So you would just ask for that in like the late 1800s. And so it's kind of three different things. It gets a little confusing when it comes to history because a lot of people kind of claim the origination of it. But as far back as the 1890s, people were making highballs. There was actually a New York City bartender, as like history goes, which is always up for discussion because people didn't really write stuff down, who ordered a large shipment of scotch in to satisfy all the English actors that were at his bar asking for scotch and soda. So it was really prominent in the late 1800s. And then he credited himself with the highball, so much so that he actually wrote a letter to the New York Times saying like, I created this, I invented this, even though it kind of already existed in Europe before he even thought to make it. So we have documented history in the 1890s. And even in like the 1930s, Harry Craddock did the Savoy cocktail book, referenced the highball as well. But I don't know how many of you have been to a bar and ordered like just a scotch and soda or a whiskey soda, right? And you get like this over diluted drink with like a bunch of ice kind of
floating. My dad's on this thing.
So that's like not technically what we want to focus on as a highball. So scotch and soda is different than what we know as like a highball today. In like the 1950s, I think is really when Japan kind of took the highball to the next level. Whiskey sales weren't really thriving. A lot of people in Japanese culture were drinking as a more sessionable thing. It was something to do socially. It was something to do at dinner. And spirits didn't really have a place at the table, so to speak. So they were like, what can we do to make this something that more people are involved in? And they really took the highball and they made it something like really exciting. And if you want to talk about like Japanese whiskey in general, the founder of Suntory, Shinjiro Tori, he kind of took that idea of the highball and he created all of these bars, and in those he featured the highball program. They're called Tories, and there was bars all over Japan that would feature that. Shinji Tori, we're going to get into Japanese whiskey a little bit before we go back into highballs. He was into pharmaceuticals, so he was doing pharmacies, which makes sense if you think about it, because back then it was alcohol-based elixirs, right? A lot of the pharmacy stuff. And then when he was 17 years old, he kind of decided to go out on his own. And he blended wine and spirits, and he was selling them to local communities at 17, just like super businessman. And it was really popular. So then he was like, I'm going to do this for real. And against the wishes of his parents, started making wine. And it didn't go well. A lot of it got sent back. So he started adding herbs to the wine. And then he tried it again, and it was super successful. They actually still make it today. Akadama port wine, Suntory still makes. It was like their first big success. And they were able to take that capital and open their first distillery. So in 1923, Yamazaki Distillery was built. Now, Shinji joined up with Masataka Taketsuru. If you've heard of Nikka whiskey, he's the founder of Nikka, which is also a beautiful Japanese whiskey distillery company. So they actually used to work together. They had like a 10-year history where Shinji was like the creative and he had all the ideas. Taketsuru really had the knowledge. He actually went to Scotland. He had studied how they made scotch, and they both really thought that there was a place for that in Japan. Like they were like, we can do this. Unfortunately, that wasn't the case at first. So their first endeavor into the whiskey world was not ideal. And that's because they were making Scotch whiskey in Japan, and the Japanese palate was not super into it. It was like super peaty, very smoky, and they have much more delicate palates. They eat a lot of more delicate foods, so it wasn't a huge hit. So then Shinji was like, we have to reconcept. We have to think about this. So he started making whiskey in the same way that they do in Scotch, but flavored for Japanese palates. And a lot of that happens in the aging and in the blending. So that's why it's like a super different, when you think of Japanese whiskey, it is really similar to Scotch, but it has so many different like brighter and floral notes to it. And the peat is a lot less prominent than you find in a lot of Scotch whiskeys, but it's still very similar stylistically. And then like the 1970s, they created a second distillery. And then after that, kind of Japanese whiskey kind of blew up. So Suntory's been really great as like the visionary for what Japanese whiskey should be. And not just because I work for Suntory, but I think some of the most beautiful products coming out of Japan are coming from that name and that family. It's just like a really great thing. So back to Highballs. How are we feeling? That was a lot of information. We got thumbs up. Are we feeling good? Okay. Okay, perfect. All right, awesome. Sometimes they talk really fast. So 1950s, there's all these Tories around. The highball is starting to be a thing. And there's a lot of differences in what is a highball and what is just a scotch and soda. And those are like kind of three major components. And I'm sure that we will go over that when we actually start making your cocktail. But the first is temperature and ice. Yeah, so you want things it's all sorts of science. I never thought I hated science in high school and college, and here I am bartending, and science is a really big part of that. So the ice matters, and so does the temperature of both the soda water and the liquid, the spirit that you're putting in it, because you're gonna melt those bubbles, you're gonna over dilute it, and you're gonna lose that refreshing component to it. So it really matters. If you don't keep your whiskey in the freezer, which not all of us do, what they'll do is they'll actually put fill your glass with ice, and you put the whiskey in, you just give it a quick stir. You're not trying to dilute it, you just want to chill it down. And then it's also important that the soda water is really cold when you add that in. Because you want it to be sessionable. That's the second component. I can't tell you how many I used to work at a bar where like someone orders like a vodka soda or whiskey soda, and it's just gun, whiskey, pour till it's done, right? There's no balance there. There's no like refreshing component to it. So it's a 1 to 3 or 4 ratio. You're not drinking to get lit, you're drinking for refreshment. You're drinking as a sessionable social thing. And then the third one is carbonation. Japanese highballs tend to use sodas that have a higher carbonation to them, which will bring us to the highball machine, which we'll talk about briefly, because you want those bubbles to last. And also that carbonic acid that occurs with higher carbonation, it activates your salivary glands. And once those are activated, it creates a more refreshing mouthfeel in your brain and your body. It's like, oh, this is so refreshing because those salivary glands have been activated. So the higher the carbonation, the better it is for that refreshment factor. So there are highball machines. If you haven't seen them, they're really rad. They're all over the country. I can tell you the Chicago bars later if you want me to send you a link. Once we reopen, you can go visit them. They'll love to see you. But what it does is it perfectly ratios carbonated water, which is filtered through a machine. It's 3 times the amount of bubbles per ounce than champagne has. Like it's hyper carbonated, and it also chills the liquor. Not that you can't hand make just as delicious of a highball at your house, especially during these quarantine social distance times. But it's something I'm really proud of this. And Tori kind of like took the charge on what the highball is and created something that's so beautiful and so balanced, and then brought it to the States so that like we could experience it in a similar way. So, you know, my grandpa always drank scotch and soda. And this is like getting to make one of these for him and having him experience like the refined kind of Japanese highball and comparing that and like watching his reaction to his face was like one of my favorite things that he and I have like experienced together. So I'm super excited for you guys to kind of join in on this highball journey. How do we feel to that? Did we cover it all? Are we feeling great? Oh, I like the emojis. That's a cute. Question? Do we have questions?
Amy, thanks so much. That was impressive and that was awesome. I learned a lot.
Awesome. I'm so glad.
Before we move on to like a demo, or actually making this cocktail together, I should say, do you guys have any questions for me?
Nope.
Yeah.
Everyone's ready to drink. You know, you know, after we make one, and after you sip it, I'm sure you might have more questions. Or just like nods of approval and.
Oh, Cam's got something. What do you got, Cam?
Yeah.
So one thing when I teach highballs that I always like to preface is that when you stir, you're accomplishing several things. You are chilling. Like if you stir a cocktail with ice, you can actually get it below 32 degrees. So you can get your cocktail itself colder than the freezing temperature of water, and mechanical agitation is part of that. But stirring also knocks the carbonation out of things. So that step that Amy talked about where she was like, stir it to chill the whiskey first and then add your mixer is super, super important, because the last thing you want to do once you pour your whiskey in is spin it around in the glass and knock all those bubbles out when they're so precious and so important to creating that really balanced cocktail. And I have found that unless I preface with that, people get super excited and they're like, let's pour all our stuff and then stir. And your whiskey will mix itself in by virtue of being lighter than the soda if you forget to mix it first. So you can just pour all your shit in there and drink it. But anyway, I'm gonna get out of the way now.
No, that was perfect. Thank you. That was really important. I love it. Thank you so much.
And we'll be doing that as we do this together. Now, I should preface this with like there's a lot more pros on this channel than have ever been here before. I'm a little intimidated, but if I do anything wrong, just like yell at me. Or actually,
I'll call him out hard.
Yeah.
It's gonna be great.
Never drinking here again.
Amy,
I want to hear you
are,
correcting the
we're ready.
pros, though. If well, actually's in there.
Yeah. Even in Japan, like a lot of bartenders have slightly different techniques. But ultimately, what's up? Even in Japan, a lot of bartenders have slightly different technique. But ultimately, like a highball, as Amy has said, is about like a couple of things. Like when you're drinking a highball, you want it to be super refreshing, right? So you want it to be super crisp. You want like to maintain as much carbonation as possible. And you also want like, and this is the reason why I like using Japanese whiskey, you want like that top note of sweeter kind of note to like float over your, like the soda water that you're using. So first I will go through kind of all the ingredients that we have here and all the tools that we're going to be using. It's not a lot. Like ultimately, this is all about technique, and we're all about transforming just a scotch and soda to something that's a little more special, right? So as always, I'll go over what I've got. In terms of ingredients, all I have here is whiskey. This is a Toki. This is a Suntory whiskey, so I think Amy's pretty happy about that. It's actually a blended whiskey made almost specifically for highballs. In Japan, there's a lot of different whiskeys that are made specifically for highballs, like Amy said. Actually, I'll bring a couple out here.
Oh, here comes the flex.
In the meantime, Nate, you're going to be mixing while you're driving? This is a Nika Black. It's also a classic one from Japan for highballs as well. And then this, actually, I don't actually use this in highballs. I just drink this constantly, is a Nika whiskey from the barrel, which just started coming to the States. So you usually have to smuggle it in Japan, or from Japan. And typically, like those whiskeys are a little later, which is why like I wouldn't recommend using your like super nice single malt scotch for this. I mean, you can if you want. You'll still have a really good time, but it feels like you should just drink that straight with a little splash of water. Anyways, so I've got Toki here. I think you guys all have your brown stuff. I've got seltzer water here. If you have like a half-open bottle of seltzer water, like please get a new one or open up a new can or something, because this is all about carbonation. Like you want crisp. You don't want limp. Lastly, I've got ice. This is a tall glass. This is a Collins glass, also known as a highball glass. There's some very slight differences between them, but for now we'll just call it that. A jigger, lemon, which is optional, and a bar screw. All right. So, like I said, everyone has a different technique. Some folks like to add a lot of ice at first. Some people like to add ice in stages. I'll be doing the technique in which we add ice in stages. So are you guys ready to follow along? You guys ready to do this? All right, I'm seeing thumbs ups. Good. All right, so first thing I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna add some ice to the glass here, like without anything else, just ice. And I'm doing this because my glass is not chilled. So I kind of want the glass to be extra cold when we're doing this. So I just put a couple pieces of glass in there, or sorry, a couple pieces of ice in this glass. And then we're just gonna give it a little bit of a stir. And again, this is still the glass. For those of whom like haven't been on this thing before, we talked about stirring technique earlier, but what you're really doing here is you're not like jamming your spoon in there. You're sweeping the outside, the back of your spoon around the outside of your glass. Even as you do it, you can feel the glass getting colder. This is what you want. Okay. Now,
As Cameron and Amy talked about, like a lot of this is about like trying to make sure that the dilution is correct as well. So like even now, you're probably seeing that like as the glass is getting colder, you're accumulating water on the bottom of your glass, and like we're gonna pour that out in just a second here. All right, so now everyone's glass is like a little cold. We're just gonna pour out the extra water that's on the bottom of this glass, so you just have ice in there. Then we're gonna add our whiskey. I'm gonna put in about 2 ounces. It kind of depends on the size of your glass. I typically like a 2-to-1 ratio of soda to whiskey, like somewhere between 2-to-1, 3-to-1.
Doug also likes to get drunk more than he likes to.
Yeah, I feel like you need to juice those numbers up, dude.
A 4-to-1.
If you want to be refreshed at all, if you could just mostly be sloshed.
Yeah, that's true. My level of tolerance is.
I thought we were obsessed.
Maybe 3
things at work.
Oh, okay, whiskey time. Ooh.
I have a question, Doug. Since I'm trash and I'm using a pint glass, how much whiskey am I putting in this? And by whiskey, I mean bourbon because it's what I have.
How much do you want to drink? No, really, like you don't.
Were they opened?
Like you don't have to fill them.
Yeah.
Right. You just put in as much as you're going to drink, and then adjust the level, the amount of seltzer water you're going to put in to accommodate that.
Okay.
If you're gonna fill that sucker all the way up with ice and cocktail,
That's what I have.
all right. Yeah. So, and you don't have ice all the way to the top, right?
No, I can.
If you put ice all the way up to the top,
Yeah, do that all the way up.
yeah.
Mm.
Then if you put like 2 3/4 ounces of bourbon in there and fill it the rest of the way up with soda, you'll get in that like 3 to 4, like 1 to 3, 1 to 4 neighborhood. You by the end of it, you will also be drunk.
I don't have anywhere to go till May, so.
You and me
At this point,
already
at this point, we've added our whiskey, and we're gonna want to give it a number of stirs. This is the chilled whiskey as well. In Japan, like a traditional amount is 13 stirs. I have no idea why it's 13 stirs. Maybe it needs to something about that, but that's what they do.
Like,
a lot of the hype around stir counting in Japanese bartending is more like white Westerners' obsession with superstitious Asian people.
Call it. Yeah.
Solid call out. Get him, Cameron.
Because the number of stirs and the number of times that you stir things and how long you stir them all go into the texture and the final dilution of the drink. And the wetness of your ice, the relative temperature of all the tools that you're using, the temperature of your spirits are all going to impact that. And in an art form as precise as Japanese bartending, the outcome of the beverage is more important than stirring something a certain number of times. And so this notion that Japanese bartenders do things in a ritualistic number of times is largely based on our Western fetishization of a very beautiful and precise craft than an accurate reflection of those practices.
Thank you, Cam. That is correct. So now you've stirred the whiskey, and it's very likely the level of ice in the glasses is dropped, right? Because like things are melting. So what I'm going to do here is add more ice just to bring it to the top, and then we're going to add soda water. So at this point, I've got super cold whiskey in the glass. I've got ice all the way to the top, and we're going to add our soda water just to top it off. Now, once you add the soda water, like the whole trick, or not the whole trick, the whole thing you want to focus on is not reducing carbonation, right? You want it to be mixed, you want it to be carbonated. You really don't want to like lose carbonation here, right? So we're going to move, not exactly fast, but smooth, because slow is smooth and smooth is fast. So I'm just going to pour in the whiskey here, the soda water here all the way to the top.
As a report, a opening club soda accident just happened.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Did all electronics survive said incident?
I guess they did.
I'm not quite sure, but
He's still talking.
Bartenders are always wet from the waist down.
Always.
Typically.
Yeah,
Just-
but if there are flames, then I will.
Yeah.
Then you should log off.
Focus on always.
I'm mainly wet from the waist up now.
Miranda's drier than the rest of us heathens, and I'm basically a prune all the time.
All the time.
Right. So at this point, we have kind of everything in the glass that's going to make a highball, but it's not mixed, right? And you want to do this like there's two different kind of techniques that I've seen. I like to stick the spoon all the way to the bottom of the glass and just lift it a little bit and kind of stir it very gently once, like all the way up.
Oh, that's beautiful. Yes.
And here's our highball. Now I'm going to garnish it with just a lemon peel. You don't have to do this. Some purists don't like to do that. I do because it's beautiful. So I'm going to take this lemon peel here. Just express the oils over the top of the glass. And then just slip it right in. And then that's it. That is the highball. Cheers, guys.
May I ask, do you know the origin of the lemon in the highball?
I do not. Do you?
I don't. I was hoping you did.
I could make something up, but then everyone would scream.
But then I might fetishize it. So you shouldn't do that.
Yeah. You can only use a yuzu peel.
Something
I don't know the origin, but I know that Suntory team, like the Highball team, recommends a lemon or grapefruit. So you're perfectly acceptable.
Awesome.
Amy, while we have you, can you talk a little bit about the differences in a highball between Japanese and Scotch whiskey or any other single malt?
As far as style and whiskey or style of
highball and like the cocktail itself?
I think that the biggest difference is not just in the carbonation. I mean, chime in, girl, because I know if you guys don't know Miranda Breedlove, she's amazing and she has a lot of knowledge as well. But it's for me, and in talking to, I'm super lucky in that, like working at Beam, there's quite a number of people that have come from Japan to the States who work in the office with us and work on these beautiful whiskeys and also on highballs. And their biggest focus is on the ratio. I think a lot of people do like that 2-to-1 ratio. And Japan, not only in its palate and the way it makes its whiskeys, which tend to be a lot lighter and more floral and a little less smoky, they want that refreshment factor like we talked about. And so it's that 1-to-3 ratio, that 1-to-4 ratio. They're looking for sessionability and they're looking for something that's really, really clean. And I feel like that's kind of the major difference when I think about like highballs. Even in a lot of places use like, because traditionally highballs could be made with ginger ale also, right? It's just like anything carbonated. And in Japan, they specifically look at like the soda, the type of soda. It's soda water because they want that whiskey to shine through. But what do you think, Miranda? Do you have more to add on that?
I think I love that explanation. The research that I have doesn't come from, it comes from mostly from tasting, I guess. So for example, if you look at a bourbon versus a Scotch versus a Japanese whiskey, just in profile, the bourbon, you get a lot more of that, like the characteristics of the bourbon, the more vanilla, more rich kind of almost concise, savory aspects. With Scotch, I feel like depending on which way you go, you get generally a little bit more age, a little bit more roundness, fullness, viscosity. And the reason I drink the Shoki highball specifically is just because I think that it has this beautiful, light, just airy, like perfect combination with the soda. I'm also a lemon or grapefruit peel kind of person. And I think it's really fun spring, summer way to drink a whiskey and soda.
Absolutely.
Before we go further, I wanted to take this time to pimp Amy's Venmo because
you really need the last word in that sentence.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Actually, Amy, if you don't mind throwing your Venmo tag in like the chat on this thing.
Ooh. Guys, this is my first time on Zoom. Let me find.
We were trying to find chat earlier.
Yeah, where is the chat?
There's no chat.
There's no chat? What the hell is this?
No. This is discount Zoom. There's no chat.
All right. Well, luckily it's very, very easy.
It's pretty easy.
Yes, that's right.
Amy, just write it down on a piece of paper and put it on.
It's just my name with a dash in between Amy and Probasco. It's just Amy Probasco. It's pretty straightforward.
Yeah, so make sure you tip your bartender. This won't be the only time that I talk about that tonight, obviously. Break.
And I think like one thing. So when I reached out to Doug earlier today, sorry, I'm camera for any of you who don't know me. There's some faces I don't recognize. Doug and Jeannie and I became dear friends when I was bartending at the since closed charcoal bar in Chicago.
Pour one out for that.
I now live in New York, but when I was seeing Doug posting increasingly about his Friday night happy hours, and one thing that I'm noticing in our community right now is that there are a lot of fundraising efforts going on because, like in New York City alone, 900,000 hospitality workers got laid off in the span of 3 days. And it takes about 3 weeks to get your first unemployment check, and rent is due yesterday. But a lot of us who work in the industry, while we interact with those of you who don't work in the industry every day as a means of securing our income, our actual social circles are pretty homogenous, right? Like the majority of my friends and intimates and the people that I interact with on a day-to-day basis are bartenders, and they're people who are in the same income situation that I'm in. And so there are an increasing number of these happy hours going on within our community. And it's a lot of penniless bartenders showing up to watch other penniless bartenders hawk their Venmo and like Cash App handles, and provide really incredible insight that is actually way more useful to you all who are drinking at home than to their fellow bartenders who also do it professionally. And so, you know, my friendship with Doug has always been this really beautiful bridge between really geeky cocktail people who are super excited about what we do, and my world, which is all really geeky cocktail people who are really excited about product and excited about you guys. But those two communities aren't talking to each other well. And the reality right now is that a lot of you all still have paychecks and legitimately have nowhere to spend that money. Oh, Miranda has sauces.
Right here for anybody who needs her Venmo.
And so, you know, one thing that was kind of one of my goals when I saw that Doug was doing these happy hours was like, Doug is wonderful. He's a great teacher. He knows a lot about cocktails. I know a lot of people who know more about cocktails than Doug, who also need money way more than Doug does right now. And I did the math in our house, and my partner, who is not a bartender, who still has a paycheck, is saving like a truly obscene amount of money by not being able to go out and give it to hospitality workers. And so being able to connect those two communities of people was something that was really important to me. He's like me, I'm the one saving all the money.
And I'm giving it all to Amy tonight.
Not our savings.
Thank you so much. Like just like for me, but also like, you know, Cam said, like all of our friends, like we're seeing kind of more and more people struggle with the same amount, and it's so nice to have that bridge and to like be able to connect with all of the people that have been sitting at our bars in this way. So like this has been super, like I feel like I'm bartending, like I get to talk to people who are super excited and don't already do this all the time. So this has been super fun. Like I can't wait to do more of these, just even just to be a part of it and drink and learn from other people. This is super rad.
And that's like one thing that I want to like, you know, it's not just like, hey, here's a tip jar. I mean, like one of the things that we're doing here, hopefully, what I'd like to see come out of this is to build regulars at bars, right? I mean, like these bars hopefully will open back up again when this is done. And having folks that are representing bars and hospitality here, like now you have a connection with like a bartender, right? You can be like, oh yeah, I saw you at that happy hour, right? You know, and I think like becoming a regular, well, I mean, look, I'm gonna preach a little bit here, but like the philosophy of being a regular is like an important thing, right? Not just for bars, not just for hospitality, but like be present, right? Go to the same place over and over again. Like chasing the new stuff is awesome, but also like being a regular is super, super important. I also want to take a moment here. Like I noticed, and I'm super happy that there's a lot of folks in hospitality here. So if you don't mind outing yourselves, would you say who you are and also what bar you're at? I mean, I think these are places that we want to go to, like when this is all done.
Kayla, I nominate you to go first.
Repeat the question.
Who are you? What bar are you at? Where are you located in the country?
I'm currently actually at a bar. My name is Kayla. I am currently in Los Angeles, in Venice, working, running the bar program at American Beauty, which is a steakhouse. But I'm originally from the East Coast, from New York City, which is how I know Cam and Amy. I've worked at bars like Maya Well, which is a pretty popular tequila mezcal bar some people have heard of. Pouring Ribbons, it's a Death & Co. sister bar. ABC Cocina, which is a Jean George property. And I got my start at Chili's. So like,
Cheesecake Factory, girl. Cheesecake Factory. What's up?
Which I love because I mean, it's nice to do what we do and get really like nerdy with cocktails. But you don't have to like make a nerdy cocktail to enjoy a drink. You don't have to go to a Michelin star restaurant to have a good meal. So I'm really all about accessibility in cocktails. So
I'm into that high life.
Yeah, I like accessibility. I like the classics, maybe like slight variations. Yeah, I answered way more than what you asked, but.
Well, that's great. Keep it going. And I'm hoping that we'll do our next one with Kayla as well. That would be awesome.
Yeah, she taught me a lot when I lived in New York. If you guys she's incredible. Cameron, Kayla, Miranda Breedlove's on here too. She's gonna go next. You guys are surrounded by some of the people that are my mentors. Like this is just a really like A-list group of bartenders. You guys are really killing it right now.
Does that mean I actually have to go next?
Yeah, girl, you gotta go next.
I'm Miranda Breedlove. I've known Amy, gosh, for like six, 7 years now. Something crazy like that. We lost her to New York for a little bit, but we have her back now, and I'm grateful for it.
I'm going to have her back someday.
I believe you somehow. I mean, but not today, unfortunately. I've been bartending in Chicago for 11 years now. Very recently, I started a new job as the National Director of Bars for Hyatt's Lifestyle Division. So all of their boutique hotels around the country, which has been really cool. But before that, I worked around Chicago at bars like Bad Hunter, Broken Shaker. I worked for Four Corners Tavern Group for a long time. What's up?
Amy, people need the last 4 digits of your phone number to give you money on Venmo.
Please give your money on Venmo. Yeah, you need to write this down and just take it. I'll keep holding it up. Actually,
take it to your forehead.
Is it backwards for you guys? Is that a thing?
No, it's correct.
All right. So I'm gonna hold this up while we chat. But yeah, I've had a chance to really learn and grow in Chicago and work with some incredible people. I've gotten to do speed rack with some of the lovely ladies on this screen and just learn from them, and it's been a really cool trip so far. So I get to travel around the country, and hopefully I'll get to spend some time at some of these bars with all of the people on this chat and have some drinks in front of these lovely humans.
Nice. Anyone else?
Yeah, you know what? Let Joe. This is Joe. Joe, come tell us where you're from and what you do.
From Columbus, Ohio, and I also bartend with Kayla. She's the best. Taught me everything I know. That's about it.
The last 4 digits of Amy's phone number for anyone who needs them.
Like, does that have to be backwards?
5. No. is.
No,
5,
you did it right the first time.
I did it right the first time.
Yeah.
It's better now.
It auto flips it.
They show your own picture is the mirror and everybody else's picture is straight.
Got it.
Awesome. I'm Cameron. I am in a lot of ways the bridge between these two worlds, which is crazy and cool, and I feel super fortunate to get to be here with you all. Like I said, I lived in Chicago for 8 years. I'm from Michigan originally, and I'm New York City based. I run a bar in Midtown called Lot 15, and a rooftop bar called The Lookup. Lot 15 is kind of my baby. I would like to say I'm a perfectly competent mixologist, but really like my thing was always that I had the best old fashioned spec, the best margarita spec, the best, like these really solid classics. And so I opened a bar that was just like 36 drinks that I wanted to serve you that you were already excited about, and I wanted you to be more excited about. So yeah, I'm geeky and precise and about very specific things, and then y'all can break whatever the fuck rules you want. I swear a ton, and I'm really sorry. Yeah, thank you so much for all of you being here. Now that I'm seeing children, I feel especially bad. Sorry about that.
Oh yeah, I gotta stop swearing.
This is not actually a 21 and up establishment.
Yeah, well, we don't have to improve it because it's all virtual. It's fine. Yeah, okay, well, so before we get on to the just heavy drinking socializing section of tonight, do we have any last questions for Amy or myself, which you should just ask Amy instead, about highballs or Japanese?
I got a question about highballs. Is there a practical reason why it's served in a highball glass rather than a low ball or some other glass?
A lot of it has to do with presentation, as well as the ratio, right? So typically, a low ball glass might be 8 ounces, but a highball glass is going to be, 10 to 12. So it's more room for the soda water, but also more room for ice, because a big component of that highball is the ice, and you want to keep things cold, but also the surface area of the ice, right? So the way when it's like, this is a low ball glass and it's kind of all together, and when it's highball glass, it's kind of less surface area, less dilution rate, and it allows room for more soda water to get in there. And if you have like the beautiful ice in a Japanese style, it's like you can kind of see through it, and it's all very pretty. So a lot of it is practical kind of science, but also looks are really important. They want it to look very clean. They want to be able to see it. So
it also holds the carbonation better. If you think of a champagne glass versus a wine glass and how long you get to keep the bubbles, that structure maintains the carbonation.
Makes sense. Thanks.
Bartenders also obsessively like to put light mixers and or light spirits in tall glasses. It is a thing that we have universally. Like if you ask people, anything with Coke goes in a rocks glass. Any light spirit with a light mixer goes into Collins glass. We don't make the rules, we just follow them.
I think part of that too, just the name highball, right? If you look back at the history of the word highball, like in the late 1800s, it was slang for tall glass. So I think that just, the same way that language kind of follows trends and paths as it goes, because people used that as the term for highball, the drink kind of became synonymous with that in the late 1800s, and then just kind of followed suit, I think, into today's times.
I have a question. Is there like a preferred club soda to pair with?
Yes.
Oh, there is. Oh, I want to learn this.
So it's actually interesting. The team at Suntory has done extensive research. I could probably email you guys some of the research that they put, like a booklet together that is available in PDF form that you guys can kind of go through and look at.
Amy, if you send it to me, I'll send it to everyone here.
Yeah, okay, perfect. I will, I'll email it to you and you can kind of send it out. But it has to do not only with carbonation levels, but also sodium levels, because typically, if you look at your soda water, it needs higher sodium to retain those bubbles, which could impact flavor. The one that Suntory's actually has, if we want to talk about brand partnerships, is Fever Tree. So that has a super high ratio for them. And that is like the official Suntory Highball partner, is Fever Tree. Topo Chico is also great. Topo Chico is a little different because the bubbles are a little bit larger, and it has a little bit more sodium, but it's one of my personal favorites. It stands up to it, and it's just like really lovely. Suntory also loves that.
Also Gardner Dunn, who's their national, Miranda has it. Gardner Dunn, who's their international, like their global whiskey ambassador. That is his favorite.
Topo, yeah, he loves Topo. Fever Tree, they also, honestly, if you're at your local grocery store and they don't have it,
Riot.
Of lower brands that if you're not going to spend, $7 on 4 bottles of soda water, Schweppes, of those brands is the number one as far as like bubbles that are long lasting. Unfortunately, the worst one to get, and it's one of my favorites, is LaCroix. The bubbles, they just dissipate so fast. Like they're gone, in like 5. It's like you open a can, you have to open a new can 5 minutes later. So
I had no idea like the bubbles could be different sizes.
Yeah, isn't that crazy?
That's a thing.
It is a definite thing.
You can taste the size of them.
So the pressure of forced carbonation and so do you want me to get real geeky?
Yes, we do.
Okay. So there are a number of different things that impact cavitation, which is the process of bubble formation. Temperature is the biggest factor, which is part of why you want your whiskey cold before you pour your soda water into it, right? The things that we're talking about that impact cavitation inside a completely sealed and closed environment are ionized solids. So salt water, because of the polarity of salt and the polarity of water molecules, actually has much higher surface tension than just plain water. So when you look at higher salinity levels and higher levels of dissolved salts in soda waters, it will actually prolong the carbonation in those beverages. So like bartenders will talk about, when you talk about relative levels of carbonation, like polar soda water is just below Topo Chico as far as actual like dissolved carbon content, but bartenders straight up talk about like coming back to a bottle of Topo Chico that they opened yesterday and taking a drink of it and being like, it still has bubbles in it. And that's because of the dissolved sodium, which actually basically makes the top of that liquid act like a lid that keeps the dissolved carbon dioxide in the liquid. So having higher sodium content or higher dissolved salts, period, it can also be potassium chloride or any other ionized and polar salt, can reduce cavitation. The presence of solids, any of you beer geeks who know about a beer clean glass, that basically means having a glass that has no imperfections and no solids stuck to the inside of the glass that are going to form nucleation points for carbon dioxide bubbles, because carbon dioxide is going to remain dissolved in a liquid until it's more energy efficient for it to form bubbles. And then so you have temperature, you have salt, and then you also have any imperfections in the storage vessel. And then the final thing that you're looking at is the pressure under which the carbon dioxide was dissolved into the liquid. So if you are, oh, one second, I gotta plug my computer in. So speaking of ionized ions in solution, so anytime that you're dissolving a gas in a liquid, doing that under higher pressure is going to result in more molecules of the gas becoming dissolved in the solid, or in the liquid rather. And so carbonation pressure is one of the ways that you can ensure that that happens. So when we talk about Topo Chico having these really big bubbles, or champagne having these really small bubbles, right? That's talking about the rate at which the dissolved carbon dioxide undergoes the process of cavitation. So champagne, which becomes carbonated through this incredibly like painstakingly slow process where yeast cells digest sugars and break them down and eject carbon dioxide, which in a sealed bottle of champagne has nowhere to go except into the champagne, is actually becoming carbonated at a much lower pressure than something that's forced carbonated like a soda water, where you're taking a container of carbon dioxide and cranking a regulator up to a prescribed setting and then forcing that gas to dissolve in the liquid at a particular pressure and temperature. So
slow, low pressure, small bubbles, high pressure, big bubbles?
Yeah, so generally low pressure and a longer process is going to create smaller bubbles because you arrive at a more natural level of carbonation for that liquid. So if you look at the pressure in the gas in the neck of a bottle of champagne, it's actually higher than the gas in the space between soda water and the fill on a soda can, because until you disrupt that equilibrium, you've actually forced more carbon dioxide into the liquid in a can of soda water than the yeast was able to force into the liquid in a bottle of champagne. Which is why you can saber a can of, or a bottle of champagne, and you can't saber a can of soda.
I've tried.
Are you going to do some Zoom savoring, Doug?
Right? Because all of that, because forced carbonation basically effectively locks away that CO2 in the liquid itself, whereas in the longer process of carbonating champagne naturally, you're unable to lock a certain amount of that CO2 away in the liquid. That's the really geeky reason. That's why, like, if you have a really hypercarbonated soda water, it can give you the sensation of burning your tongue. Some of it is that when you force carbon dioxide to dissolve in liquid, it creates carbonic acid, which Amy talked about. Part of the reason why highballs are refreshing is because they actually have a lower pH than traditional water. They're more acidic, which stimulates that salivary response. And the other reason is literally like explosive cavitation, where the formation of bubbles on your palate creates like a mechanical scraping action that can feel like being burned by something, which is part of why like sparkling wine and foie gras make a great pairing, right? Because you're mechanically removing that fat from your palate. So anyway, really long-winded, really geeky response to why different soda waters taste and feel different in your mouth.
Wow, thank you. I have a whole new appreciation for club soda now. I really like never ever thought about like even the possibility of different size bubbles and how that impacts taste and sensation and all these things. So it's very edifying.
Before we move on to the social portion of tonight, does anybody else?
Wait, this hasn't been the social portion?
Yeah, give me 3 more drinks.
I just figured like this is how everybody talked.
No, but like, does anybody have any more questions? I feel like we're sitting in a masterclass for like cocktails, right? And like, oh wait. Oh, my timer just rang. It's time to talk about A. Probasco's
story corner.
Yeah.
Wait, can I ask one more question?
Yeah, I do. Oh.
No, next.
More burning question.
Next week. Social time. Just kidding. Go ahead.
No,
I will answer to my best of my ability.
We'll take another question before one. A. Probasco, thank you.
Yeah, cheers to you.
Yeah, 2. We'll take one more question before we get to social time and me like drunkenly making kachi pep.
I have about 15 minutes before the whiskey like sets in and I pass out. So
that's right. Yeah.
So Amy, you mentioned that like the most popular citrus pairings are lemon and grapefruit. Like what's the most popular thing out there, and like what's the biggest like differences I guess between the two? Because like we pick lemon, but I mean, how does it change if we go team grapefruit?
I'm sure I'm 100% sure that Cameron can get more into the science of things, but I can talk to you bartender perspective. It's almost like when you drink lemon juice versus grapefruit juice, right? The pH levels are different. And so there's the lower the pH, like the more acidic, right? So when you drink grapefruit juice, it's a little softer. It doesn't have as much like bite. Like I like to do when I'm at the bar, I'm like, it's got like that to it, you know? And the oils that are found on the outside of that fruit are similar, right? So it's gonna have a lower pH, which is gonna make it more acidic, and it's gonna bring out different flavors from the whiskey. I actually, if you wanna get into like brand pairings, grapefruit with Toki is one of my favorites because it's a little softer, and there's some of that like vanilla and cherry blossom note in Toki that I really love. And I really like lemon with when I do like vodka sodas, like the Haku they do. It's really popular. They do like Haku High. It's just like it's a vodka soda but with similar ratios to a highball. And the lemon, I think because vodka is such a clean spirit and it doesn't have a lot of those kind of underlying flavors, you really get that kind of like bite from the citrus. Whereas like I like the lime is gonna be a little softer. It's like if you had like lemon is gonna be super high acid, kind of lime is in the middle, and then grapefruit's a little underneath. It's just a softer experience, and it pulls out different flavors. If you make old fashions and you do the orange oils over it, it not only changes the smell, but it changes the whole makeup of the drink. And if you did a lemon over an old fashioned, it would be a totally different experience because orange is so much softer and sweeter than a lemon, right? So it's going to pull out different flavors from that bourbon. And the same thing is here with the whiskey and the highball. It's going to react differently depending on which spirit. If I do a bourbon highball, I love an orange with it because I think that the orange notes with that caramel and that vanilla in the bourbon like react really well together. With the Japanese whiskey, because it's a little softer and a little more floral, I really love a grapefruit. I think it'd be really fun if you guys like made two and maybe you had like a grapefruit peel and a lemon peel. You can kind of see for yourself. It's like wild how different it's going to make the way that you interpret and the way that you experience the whiskey. It'll change depending on the kind of the oils that you add to it. I don't know, Cam, do you have any more like science behind the scenes?
Dude, you guys are blowing my mind.
Cool. I didn't really think about it in terms of acidity levels. I was like, Jolly Rancher flavors, lemon.
Yo, get wild. Throw Jolly Ranchers in it. It's your world.
Yeah,
not necessarily a Suntory approved garnish, but if you want Jolly Ranchers in your highball, it's quarantine and no one's gonna come in.
God damn right.
You do not have grapefruits, but now I'm like, grapefruit.
Green apple, whatever you got, it's fine.
So
cat hair, fucking lint, whatever.
We're strong on the dog hair garnish in this household, but what do you use? So
Ramen noodles work really well.
My hair for dog hair. So in citruses,
ramen noodles are for later tonight.
That's for after all that. That's the garnish. That's the in-stomach garnish for the highballs.
Oh God, throwing up ramen's not chill, not good.
So I wanted to take it away from cocktail for a second. I know the cocktail is valid. But I wanted to everyone to just like shout out like where are you guys coming from? I see folks from like my boy Nate from Hawaii's here. I see folks from LA. A lot of folks in Chicago, a lot of folks in New York. Do you guys just want to shout out where you're coming from?
No.
Thanks, Kyle.
I like to remain anonymous. You don't know me, bitch.
Cool. All right.
That didn't work very well, dude.
Nathan's from all over. He's driving.
Oh, I don't care where you're from. Have you all filled out your census?
What?
Have you filled out your census?
Yes. I started like 3 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Amy, I had a quick question just about you had already mentioned that you make some bourbon highballs. And if there's just like, I guess like broad brushstrokes, the difference between using different whiskey spirits, and then if you would put any other spins on them besides like orange and lemon.
Yeah, I love classic highballs with soda water. Specifically, I really love. You can use ginger ale. The thing I look at a highball as, it's almost like if you take a bourbon or a whiskey neat, it's like all those flavors are happening on your tongue at once, right? It's all very compacted, and it's kind of up to you to discern all the different layers of flavor that people talk about. And I feel like when you add the soda water, it's almost like running a ribbon through those layers, and it just separates them out. So you're able to kind of like more easily discern what all the different flavors are and really pick up on everything that kind of like underlies it. So bourbon is really great. I mean, one that I drink the most often is Jim Beam Black, which is the same Nashville Jim Beam, but it's aged for 4 years longer. I think, honestly, like if you have a favorite, it's so cool to try it neat. Like, so do like a sip of it neat of like your favorite bourbon, and then do it in a highball. And it's like they took all the flavors and they lengthened it out, and you can kind of experience them one at a time and really see all of like the beauty and the different levels of stuff going on inside of it. So I think the great thing about highballs is like there's no right or wrong spirit to use. If you have one that you really love and you want to dig into, then you can totally do that too. I've done a Lafroig. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Lafroig.
Oh yeah.
I hate that shit.
It's
That is gross. I clean my sink with that.
Like iodine.
Okay, so what's interesting about that is like I don't love it either. Like I'm gonna be real honest with you, it's not my favorite because it's like drinking bonfire next to a hospital. So
Put it lightly.
That it was really cool because once I put it in a highball, it's all of a sudden you get these like vanilla notes and then these kind of honeysuckle notes that you never probably would have gotten on its own. It just leaves it in length. So if you have a bourbon or a scotch or a whiskey that you're super into, soda water is such a cool thing to do it, and it brings all of those flavors full circle. It's like such a different experience. So I think, experimenting with what you like is my favorite.
I can't hear you at all.
So we need to mute some of these streams. If you're not talking, mute your stuff.
Well, that's
I think we're getting Nathan's car.
I got you. Oh, we're good. Go ahead.
Better? Are we good?
Yeah. As the admin, I have the capability to mute people. It feels like too much power.
All right. Something about the fire starter you call a frog.
Lefroy, yeah.
Lefroy.
The green bottle, it's like super, super peaty. It's like drinking a campfire, I'm not gonna lie. But even something like I don't typically drink, when I put it in soda water, it gives me all of these different nuances that I wouldn't have noticed otherwise. And the cool thing is is experimenting. When I drink gin and tonics, I don't like lime with it because I think that it takes away from all of the really great flavors in the gin. I like grapefruit in my gin and tonics, but it's like a personal preference. So I think when you're looking at the acidity and kind of like what your preferences are, it's super easy to make different flavor combinations. And it's like something fun. I mean, since we have time, something kind of fun that you can do at your house, especially with, something as easy as a citrus peel and getting that oil in there. And
so the real question is,
yeah.
Oh, that feedback.
You gotta take off your gaming headphones. What the hell?
Are you super into Malort? If you're super into grapefruit,
I want to tell you that while I love that,
I will only accept a yes answer. Otherwise, I will kick you from this group.
Problem. Malort starts like grapefruit and honey, and it's so beautiful for the first like 0.5 seconds, and then it turns into like gasoline and dirty shoelaces, and it stays right here and it doesn't leave.
Some of us are trash people. That's what we like.
My favorite way of describing Malort, and I love Malort.
Tread lightly.
Is it's a vulcanized tire soaked in grapefruit juice, lit on fire, and you have to be into some weird shit to like that. But for some of us, we really, really love it.
I think that Chicago, because people live in Chicago, we kind of like punish ourselves like with the weather and like.
It's not a punish. It's a true enjoyment.
It's a punishment for your mouth, and it's fine. And some people are into that, and I'm not going to kink shame you.
I'm about to fight you through this Zoom thing.
What's wrong with you?
I've had too many champagnes tonight, man. By 7. It's my bedtime.
There.
Plus, I'm out of Malort, so.
Thank you.
Definitely just used bourbon, which is questionable at best.
Say what?
Mostly excited about tasting pre-acquisition and post-acquisition Malort side by side.
Yeah.
I currently have both in my house and no job.
And did I ever tell you that like a friend of mine and I were like pretty close to buying random Malort? And then Jeannie had other ideas with what to do with our retirement funds.
Like actually retire?
Yep, that was part of it. Wow, well, thanks, guys. Like, this has been a really good time. And I'm saying thanks not to put a cap to the night. I think, like, part of the...
Don't lie, dude. You want us out of here.
Like just hanging out afterwards. But I'm just saying thanks because I'm probably going to drunkenly make cacio e pepe, like, very soon. So
Make what?
I'm going to make a pasta cacio e pepe. Classic Italian recipe. You guys
I can't wait to see it on Instagram.
Zoom cooking class, Doug.
What's that?
Zoom cooking class.
Yo, let's just go to Jug's house right now.
Yeah, let's just spread it. Yeah.
Quarantine party at Doug's.
We all clearly have a very sound understanding of what quarantine
Some things are worth breaking.
Fucking right.
One of those coronavirus